Welcome to the life work of Nora and Richard Dauenhauer. My name is Linda Wynne. I have a master's degree in library information science from University of Arizona. And William Geiger had worked with me on this presentation. An elder provided a wonderful statement on the assessment of this wonderful collection. Nora and Richard were both highly intelligent and prolific scholars. Nora's work is valuable as she was so deeply rooted in her culture. She taught many and is loved by many. We should do everything we can to preserve her work. It is not a matter of money. The value of her work is immeasurable. And that is so true of this life work that was processed and made available for the public. They were traveled ambassadors. They did lectures and readings and keynote addresses. They show slides and video about the Clinking culture and shared the historical context of their knowledge. They translated stories and songs from Clinking to English. They also captured Clinking ceremonies, the protocols, and had done interviews on various multimedia like audio, video, and reel-to-reel tapes. Nora was born in 1927 in Juneau, and she was raised in Juneau and Hoonah and lived on the family fishing boat. In the 70s, she attended the Sealaska Methodist University, and there she met Richard Dauenhauer and she married him. In the 1980s through the 1990s, she was the principal researcher of Sealaska Heritage Foundation in Juneau. Then from 1997 to 2017 till her death, she became semi-retired, a consultant. She volunteered at schools. She was a freelance writer, and she did community work. Richard was born in 1942 and raised in Syracuse, New York. In 1960s and 70s, he taught at the Sealaska Methodist University, where he met Nora. From the 1980s through the 1990s, he was the Director of Language and Cultural Studies at Sealaska Heritage. On and off from 2002 to 2011, he taught at University of Alaska campuses like Anchorage and Southeast. And he trained many others to teach and translate Clinking. From 2019 and 2014, he became a freelance writer, researcher, and consultant until his death. Nora is wearing her vest, and she belonged to the Sockeye Salmon clan in Haines. She was appointed as the ceremonial matriarch and in 2010, and that is a huge honor for a woman to receive that title of their clan, because she had the knowledge that she possessed about the Clinking language and the culture and the protocols. Richard, he was adopted to the Brown Bear House of the Choo-Canady clan of Hoonah. This was very appropriate for protocol reasons because Nora's father was Choo-Canady. So, and this means that Richard was on the eagle side and Nora was on the raven side in Clinking culture. He was a strong advocate, just like Nora, about the Clinking language and the oral literature, which he made it his life's work, along with other writings like poetry, the Russian church, German was another favorite language of his, and Russian. The Dauenhauers were prolific authors. They wrote many essays, papers, keynote addresses. They co-authored and co-edited several anthologies and bilingual books, articles in professional journals, and they developed plays and scripts for radio and film and documentaries. In this slide, they hand wrote things before there was a computer. Of course, there was a typewriter with a ribbon that they had used. And then they got to use the beginnings of the first computer. And of course, they knew how to use the latest technology of today's computer technology. Nora expanded her writing into poetry. She had 2 published books. The one that is well known is Life Woven with Song, and that's more almost like a autobiography about her life as a Clinking woman living in Southeast Alaska. She wrote 3 Raven stories into plays. And these plays were performed at the Nakahadi Theater here in Juneau, as well as into the Kennedy Center, the Museum of American Indian, the Fitzgerald Theater, and the University of Arizona. Richard had a creative writing aspect on his side. His was mostly in poetry. But he too wrote a Glacier Bay Concerto in 1980s. And then his 2 books, Frames of Reference and Benchmarks, were selected poems and essays that he written. Most of it's kind of in these 2 publications focusing on Southeast Alaska. His PhD dissertation titled Texts and Contexts of Clinking Oral Traditions in 1975 must have been the turning point for him to commit on studying the Clinking language. Another publication that he's known for that he collaborated with Father Michael Olinsky was Conflicting Visions in Alaska Education. Richard loved being a Russian Orthodox, and he served his church as a lecturer and a chanter. He sang bass with the Clinking choir. He loved theology, liturgical music, and feasts. He served his church and his members tirelessly. He loved to care and support the church. Nora loved having fun. In this picture, she's wearing an eye mask with Lance Twitchell, an assistant professor of native languages at University of Alaska Southeast. Lan is also a member of the Sakai clan like Nora. Lance learned the Clinking language from the Dauenhauers and receives support where he earned his PhD. This collection provides unique resources for researchers, the general public, and schools. There are unpublished typed papers and articles and speeches. There are some handwritten transcriptions and notes and drafts to show the process of their writing, especially in the translation. There are video, audio, and reel-to-reel tapes on Clinking language and culture. There was an IMLS grant that was awarded to Sealaska Heritage Institute that provided monies to process the Dauenhauer literary estate. It took 15 months to process this collection, and would like to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for this opportunity. There were 4 principles in the process. The first phase was the basic principles. Number one was the provenance, to determine or understand who the creator of this collection was, rather than who donated this collection. The original owner is maintained throughout the collection, especially when this is going to be available for active use. There were 4 levels of control on implementing the provenance into the original order, and the first one is the collection level. There was an assigned number from the Proficio database given for this collection. The second is the series level, which is the box number. The third is the file unit level. This is where it's handwritten in pencil, the name of the file and what series level it is and collection level, as well as the file unit level, which begins with 001 sequentially. Then there is the item level. Most of the collection was done in the file unit level, but the multimedia was done on the item level. Phase 2 is the arrangement. There was research that was obtained from the rest of the staff when questions raised about how to categorize and receive clarification of some content that was, could be one category or another. There was a survey to examine the records that's received from the donor on any instructions, any restrictions, or disposal. We did not dispose anything from this collection. We determined what historical Clinking language documents to be kept by the SHI archives, and the other information like personal records, other languages, the Russian Orthodox, duplicate books, etc., were put into a storage unit for the family to disperse or see fit of what they would like to do with that information. The processing plan, we worked together as a staff, especially with Emily Pastore, who is the project manager for this IMLS grant, on how to go forward. These boxes were stored in a storage unit, so we had to freeze the boxes for a whole week to kill any mold, bacteria, any contaminants in those boxes before it can ever go into the vault. We maintain the original order in each of these boxes. We used a theory called more product, less processing methodology. And what that means is that we didn't do any sorting of making sure that we remove duplicates and keeping the topics all together. What we see is what we had inventoried. And as we were doing this, we were carefully checking the content and if there was a label, if that matched or not. And if most of the time it did, but sometimes there were no labels on the folders, and had to take a look at the content to figure out the new label. Phase 3 was the preservation. This is where, as we were inventorying, we transferred the documents into acid-free boxes and folders, and the labels were handwritten using pencil. It says here the collection was examined for any mold, insects, or other contaminants. I was happy to say there was no water damage or mold. There was a few little insects, but nothing really that would damage the collection. Most of the photographs were inserted into archival sleeves to protect the photographs from being handled. And then the various multimedia, the video, audio, reel-to-reel, CDs, and DVDs, they were sorted according to the different multimedia in separate boxes, and then it was indexed that way. And so now for the future digital conversion grant, they have an idea. The staff will have an idea of what the volume is in each of those multimedia sources. The final phase, number 4, is the description of the collection, what is normally called the finding aid. And it provides information about the person, the family, the culture, anything that has to do with the collection in short paragraphs. The final parts of the finding aid is the title page. Then you got your biographical and historical sketch of the collection. You have the provenance notes, and then the scope and content note, which shows the breakdown of how many boxes, how many videotapes, audio tapes, etc., to get an idea of the volume of this collection. The Dauenhauers were advocates for education, especially getting the Clinking language into schools. They wrote and developed teaching and study materials for K through 12 as well as university education. They came up with curriculum and workshops and trainings for teachers, and they also helped put together the Clinking immersion programs for Southeast Alaskan School District. They were very supportive of college students that were pursuing PhDs in linguistics, especially revitalizing the Clinking language. They were renowned, and I consider them a glue of the Clinking community, of the elders. They reached out to the elders, recorded them, asking them questions, getting more information as much as they can so they can be shared for the rest of the world. They loved children and the books that they had put together for them, and youth and adults. They came out with outreach programs to utilize the Clinking language and culture, especially their Clinking classics, of understanding the content that was intended for us to learn. The Classics of the Clinking Oral Literature, Volume 1, Our Ancestors, is the first volume, and it presents Clinking texts with facing English translations. This book talks about potlatching, the narratives, the speeches that were made, that they had collected and made available for all of us to read and study. Volume 2 is Healing Our Spirit, another one that followed up with potlatching, ceremonies, and more of Clinking speeches that were in Clinking texts and provided in an English translation. Volume 3, All Culture. This is a wonderful publication of biographies of more than 50 men and women about their lives, how they were shaped during their time, and their place in history of the Clinking people. Volume 4 is Russians in Clinking America, the battles of Sitka, 1802 and 1804. The Kitsati elders in Sitka in the 1980s had approached the Dauenhauers to do this research and come up with a book about the Russians and the battles with the Tlingit people. It took them many years to collect material and translate information from Russian. They seeked out Lydia Black, who also is a scholar in the Russian language, and assisted Richard Dauenhauer on these translations and helped with the publication of this book. And finally, Volume 5, A Collection of Raven Stories. As we are speaking today, the staff of the Language Speakers and Linguists are working tirelessly on the manuscript for the publication of this book. That the Dauenhauers had begun working on this book, but it is wonderful that we have staff to be able to continue their work and finish this wonderful publication that will be available soon. You're probably wondering about the collection use. There is so much material in here for everyone. And it's going to be available in the library catalog. There's finding aids. Some information is going to be available online, and you can make arrangements through SHI's library catalog and through archives to be able to look at the primary sources in their reading room. There is an archival resource guide that will be made available online that provides resources for teachers, students, researchers, and the general public. It is, if you will, it's like a huge summary of this collection, and it's providing links through SHI's library and their Proficio database of some of the digitized papers of the Dauenhauers. There were approximately over 2,700 documents and multimedia that was inventoried for this grant. And then in the future, there's going to be another grant for the digital conversion, more digital conversion of these documents, and possibly the multimedia to be available online. Guna Chish, that's thank you in Tlingit. Thank you for listening about this wonderful process of the Dauenhauers' life work. It was a privilege and an honor to learn so much about the Dauenhauers and their work.